Hi everyone. Okay, welcome back to our Korean webinar today again. Yesterday, we have heard from Professor Ji Care with regards to the Korean politeness, and today we have another very interesting topic. It's about Confucian background and the ways that we communicated in Korean language. As always, the lecture will be given about 45 minutes. And then we'll have a discussion in the last 15 minutes. So if you have any questions, please leave your comments or suggestions or any questions or even criticisms in the chat room. So please let me hand over to Professor Ji Care.
Hello, everyone. Very nice to meet you all. I hope you are enjoying nice weather and having a good day. Thank you for joining us today. So let me just share my screen now so that you can, oops. Okay. Oops. Okay. Can you hear me okay? And so today we are going to look at another few Korean films and they will particularly talk about Neo-Confucian sort of influence, cultural influence in Korean language, which is very important because as we talked about yesterday, the hierarchy, the relational dynamic is very complex in Korean language. And this is one of the reasons why Korean is difficult to learn. and linguistically speaking, Korean language is in a way sort of easy in one sense, because, for example, like word order is flexible, so you can put subject, object wherever you want. It doesn't, it's okay. And also we don't have inflection. So there's some sort of flexibility in syntax or structures. And also there are a lot of English words these days in Korean language, but the most difficult thing, and that makes Korean as sort of top most difficult languages across the board, is this tuning interpersonal dynamics. Whether to use polite expressions or not. If I want to use polite expression, what sort of politeness level should I use? And one thing, excuse me. One thing which is very often in a textbook or when you learn Korean, only talks about sort of the verbal level, linguistic level of politeness. So how we should say polite speech style like heyo rather than half talk or casual style. But also in the real time spontaneous interaction, what matters also is non-verbal, like visual aspects. So how you behave, how you posture, how you look at other people, those things very, very important. And the two level, the kind of the things that I'm trying to say is that verbal and non-verbal has to be modulated or harmoniously used. Otherwise, you can kind of represent yourself very much insincere person, or you can create some humor. So we'll talk a lot of, and film is a wonderful material to look at both sides, verbal and non-verbal aspects. So we are going to look at, but in terms of like this kind of interpersonal dynamics, the hierarchy is very important, not only before, in the past, in pre-modern Korea, but also modern Korea, contemporary Korea. Hierarchy of different, with different criteria really matters, as we look at yesterday through the lens of Parasite. Just because we haven't kind of looked at the the interpersonal dynamic examples in Parasite. We will look at some of the examples from Parasite today, and then we will also look at some sort of Neo-Confucian value system, particularly for the 5 relational dynamics and how they are portrayed in contemporary Korean society through the lens of films. And particularly we'll talk about also womanhood in contemporary Korea through this film 1982 Ki-Jung. Okay, so this is the plan. So yeah, this is what we just talked about. As I said before, like verbal aspect and non-verbal aspect together. And these are the two things, different levels all together put and make meanings either polite or impolite or a little bit polite. So you kind of, it's very difficult, even native speakers, to find the right, level. If you kind of slightly different, made a slightly mistake, like as I said yesterday, without negotiating, changing the half-talk speech styles, that could create a lot of tension too. So which we'll talk about in lecture 5. So very important to find the right speech level, right verbal, non-verbal expressions, and to be able to find the right relational dynamic. This is the example we talked about yesterday. Basically, we can't say a word without knowing who we are talking to. But it's also interesting that it doesn't just mean between Korean speakers, but when Korean speakers we talk with non-Korean speakers too, probably in the first instance they will say, oh, you're a foreigner. But as you become good friends, you actually need to figure out what sort of relational dynamics between the two it's, do we want to have some kind of hierarchical relations like Koreans based on age or something else? Or so this is very much important, not only conversational dialogues between Koreans, but Korean and non-Korean. And so we'll look at some of the intercultural relationships through the lens of the film Parasite, because I think a lot of you have watched the film last year and maybe or this year. And I highly recommend the film. So this is the sort of, and then we'll look at some of the examples now, and then we'll go back to this Neo-Confucian influence, and that will, a lot of things will start make sense to you. So this is the Song Kang-ho, the father, and the Ki-Woo, their relationship. And it's quite beautiful in the way how, in a way, father in this film, not really necessarily successful in the worldly sense, but he's kind of really good father, and his son, even if his father is struggling in terms of getting a job, it kind of shows respect throughout, and his father expresses intimacy or his affection through the language, which is kind of invisible. Also, when you translate this thing, look at the subtitles, it's very difficult to tell. But in a way, this is visible for Korean viewers because the father always uses, the terms which are respectable to his son, and his son also uses very much respectable language to his father, no matter what. Even if at the end the tragedy happens, but still you can see that the same very much respectable tone is used by the son, which means really shows a lot that his relationship with his father has been always really good, and it hasn't been influenced by the outside factors. And so this father-son relationship, which is the first relationship that we are going to come back later. And also here, like Ki-Woo, his son, and his Mrs. Park, who is the rich 사모님. And when first they met, Mrs. Park, kind of despised him because he's a student, and he doesn't seem to come with his very sort of like privileged background so on. But then after interview, she decided to hire him as a teacher. So after that, the interpersonal dynamic changes. Before, she didn't really show its respect. But in Korea, as I said yesterday, 선생님 actually literally means that someone who was born before you, but also could mean the teacher. So when he became a teacher for her son and her daughter, the relational dynamic completely changes. She shows respect to him, and the kind of respect that she shows is visible. For example, like her gesture, and you can see here, like I wish I could play the video clips, but you can see her two hands kind of folding together, very often again, like expression showing respect. And so she's now treating him as a teacher and showing respect. And also his name suddenly become Kevin Sam. He never introduced himself Kevin, but somehow, in Korean society, again, like Kevin or English name, American name is something sort of sounds more privileged, the name kind of showing some sort of privilege. So she decided to call him Kevin, and Sam means 선생님. So, but it's not like a very much, greatly showing great respect, but some kind of respect. So she came up with this address term Kevin Sam, and then started showing her respect, and her kind of, this is very much visible through her, different interactional, reaction. And for example, like giving him the money, tuition fee, she's giving it with two hands, again, like showing respect. So that sort of 선생님, the teacher, and the parent and teacher and the parent relational dynamic create some sort of visual non-verbal language in this scene. And then also like this, she is Mun-Kwang, who is the housekeeper. But again, like when he first came in, she didn't really show any sort of respect. But now that he is employed as a teacher for Dasong, suddenly she, and as not only Mrs. Park, but she started to show affection and respect. So let me know whatever you need. So her attitude changed again. So again, we see like, I think probably this is quite a case in Korea, that the respect towards teacher, towards your senior. Once the relationship is set, then you have to kind of show the respect again. But this is sort of complex because there's again like the other dimension, like which is socio-economic status. So there are different dimensions, different factors interacting to create a particular reaction. But this is the case when normally whether you're rich or poor, the respect toward the teacher has to be shown. So this is very good example. And yeah, and then you see here, like again, this time his sister now became a teacher for a son. Well, first time, well, not sure, she wasn't quite sure, but again, she was introduced that her teacher, Jessica Ki-Jung, is a like American, graduate, studied in the US and very much with privilege. So unlike her brother, she was introduced as someone with great privilege. So she showed some kind of respect. But then later on, somehow she realized, the dynamic was before Mrs. Park was the employer and Jessica was employee. But that so sort of hierarchical relationship shifted because Jessica, the teacher, kind of showed, well, I have authority and I can, really help your son's problem. So somehow she realized that, well, I need to really trust and rely on her. So that the dynamics almost changed. And she, Mrs. Park, rather than employer, she almost behaves like, her younger sister, like, really, I want your protection and understanding. So that sort of language is again visible through her attitude, her sort of behaviors, Mrs. Park's behaviors. A lot of time also she uses her hands to cover her mouth. This sort of, again, particular behavior like this is not, shows that your attitude toward the other person, that you're not like senior, but you're not like, you're kind of showing that you're not, your relational dynamics between the two is different. So you somehow kind of acknowledging the other person's sort of authority or, the power and the relational dynamics. But this covering mouth, this gesture will come back tomorrow. But anyway, and then suddenly it's another very interesting dimension because her husband came and she's introducing Jessica, who is the teacher, but she starts speaking in English. Three of them, Jessica and husband and also Mrs. Park, Mrs. Park and Mr. Park, all of them Korean. They don't need to speak in English at all. But she starts speaking in English, kind of showing off her educational background. Her English is not necessarily great, but she kind of starts speaking in English to kind of show off her educational background. So English in Korea, South Korea, and contemporary Korea are very often considered as sort of like social capital, like something that kind of show off your education. It is quite interesting that in pre-modern time that your knowledge about classical Chinese played something similar. Literary Chinese played a almost cultural capital, but nowadays English definitely is behaving plays the role as cultural capital. So she introduced her in English. And then their relationship again, like you can see that Mrs. Park's behavior, like holding hands together, almost like you are my teacher, you are my children's teacher, but almost she's showing like you are my teacher too. So like showing, asking advice, and her attitude really changed from the first time when she met her brother. And then it's very interesting that the driver and driver is a address term again in Korean film, Kisa, which means it just means driver. But it's interesting that you wouldn't call someone driver yun. I mean, but in Korean, so much so that in order to find the right speech styles, address terms, you kind of provide all kinds of address terms. As I said before yesterday, there's not many second person pronouns, but you always use sort of address terms of all kinds. So he is called as a driver Yun Gisa, but it's very interesting the way how he speaks to Jessica, maybe probably similar age, but he uses utter respectable language, saying 댁 앞에까지 모셔드릴까요? Which means like, all the levels, 댁 and 모시다, all the lexical level actually shows that it's not like just polite. It's very, very polite. He uses very polite language because again, like her status now is not probably, they both are employees, but she is a teacher. And so he's kind of showing respect that my boss's son's teacher, so he is kind of using that language. But it's quite interesting that it's all invisible when you look at English subtitles. But it's also very important in a Korean context to use that level of politeness in order to be socially appropriate. So it's, probably, two employees from, very English setting or, any cultural setting, two employees, but they have no hierarchy. But in this film, we see that in Korea, this is another hierarchy. They need a hierarchy. And the way how he picked up the hierarchy is that you are the teacher. So therefore you are, I also have to show my politeness and my respect, which is very interesting. Again, I said the teacher is very important in terms of this deciding the hierarchical, in deciding hierarchical relations. Then, they were fighting together and they were, utter disastrous situation. But very interestingly, in order to kind of find some favor, Mrs. Kim started to use 언니, which is like, my sis, you're my sister, therefore you should understand me, you should forgive me. So the way how you can find some favors by using the address term 언니. I think that was very interesting. It was translated in subtitled in English sis, but I don't think that actually doesn't mean much. But in Korean, by ignoring someone age, by calling someone 언니, means that you have authority over me and I show my respect towards you. So it's kind of a very handy device to mend any kind of broken relationship. But I think this case, it went too much far. So it was difficult to mend. And again, like in order to kind of mend the relationship between the two, the son, Kyu starts calling, 아주머니, like showing some kind of respect, but it didn't work. And it's interesting though, Mr. Kim started calling, got really, this crazy situation, but he called Mun-Kwang 아줌마, but in English, I mean, not consistently translate address terms or not consistently translate in any film, in any Korean film when it's translated in English. But interesting, one of the times when they picked up 아줌마, they called lady, but it doesn't really make sense when you're really upset and have to call someone, but there's no other way. So he called 아줌마, which is kind of like, oh, you please stop. But then it's translated as lady. So I think contextually it doesn't really make sense. But what I'm trying to say is that it's very difficult to choose the right address term in English because it's very different. In English, you can use the second person pronoun without any limit, whereas in Korean, it's very subtle, delicate, and complex matter, but it's also untranslatable very often. And yeah, this one I may skip because of time. And then sort of the things that probably what I'm trying to say is the verbal level, language level, and non-language level. But non-language level, verbal level, some of the things that you very often hear is like this address terms, but also like suffix like a, ya, like kiu, ya, or someone plus ya, kind of like vocative particle we call it, but it's again like showing the intimacy and the affection between the two. But again, like this is very difficult to use. I mean, you can't just pick up anybody and say, well, I want to show my intimacy with you, therefore I'm going to use affectionate suffix like a and ya. You can only use them if you're in the equal level or the person who you're talking to is your junior. So there's something like one level is very much personal and affectionate, so you can choose and you can modulate. On another level, you have to kind of also think about the hierarchical matter. So hierarchy really is at the center of this Korean language. So even if you want to really show your affection, you can only use to your friends or your juniors. The friend is in Korean is very interesting. Because friend in Korean very often means those people with the same age. Sometimes those who went, even very similar ones. So even if you're born same year, if you went to the school different year, you may not become friends. So sort of the age again is very sensitive matter and crucial criterion in deciding interpersonal relationship and friendship even in Korea, which I think you may be by now very much familiar with if you watch Korean films or Korean drama. A lot of people in reality show talk about the relational dynamics. If you watch any variety show, 5 minutes when they first meet, they kind of make a negotiation. How should I call you? Are you my friend or you're junior? And then once you settle, then you can, have a good conversation, good relationship. But if that is not settled, then you always feel something is not right. We need to figure it out. Who is junior and who is senior, and how shall we negotiate the relationship between the two in terms of in considering the relational intimacy and hierarchy together. So it's you watch that all the time, that negotiation process. But anyway, affectionate, but also means that if you can use it without trouble, means that the other person interlocutor is your junior or your friend or your sibling. And again, the same thing with the 님 or kesa or she. This thing again means that the other interlocutor is your senior. So there are sort of small lexical verbal cues which shows that who is the senior, who is the junior. But if you're not really good at Korean, it's very difficult to pick up. But something that you can easily pick up is the gesture, the behaviors. As you can see, like 다송 and says, okay, goodbye to teacher. But I cannot imagine any English kid or 다송 sage would say goodbye to teacher like this. Teacher sits down and he bows to teacher. So of course not everybody does, but I think it kind of shows very much like how teacher is been esteemed and respected in Korean society. And this is employer-employee relationship again. There are complex. There could be complex situation where age, two different factors conflict with each other. Like in this case, age and seniority and employer-employee relationship. And this is something that even if one can say, employer-employee relationship is more important than age, but still, like if it somehow if it's taken for granted, if the young boss behaves badly, the older employee would always feel bad, and the relational always will be tricky to become true friends, I would say, as we watched yesterday, the clip. And again, like in the school, 선배, 후배, like your senior, junior, again, very important. It's not translated in the Parasite subtitle, but again, it's the brother is introducing a sister like by junior. So junior, senior. Again, school is very important, particularly. I think it's very probably most strict circumstances, the environment of this hierarchy is middle school or high school, whether it's junior or senior, maybe in university too, but I think the sort of secondary school setting is more strict. Are you the junior or senior? Which relationship you have with the other person, and if it's not met satisfactorily, it does really cause conflict and a lot of trouble, as we will see in lecture 5, and also a lot of kinship terms. So basically, the idea is that by using the kinship term, the idea behind that we are all the family. We are basically we belong to one family. So I can call you my aunt, someone who you met first time in the restaurant, serving lady, you can call her aunt and she will be happy. But at the same time, there's another aspect. People find it difficult to accept it. Or I haven't met you before. How can you call me aunt? So there's not like, not everybody is happy with that sort of way of calling with each other in kinship term. Some people have some reservation, and so it's kind of dynamic. Some people like it, and you have to really figure it out whether the other person likes the idea or not. So it's again like not like a clear-cut answer, but you have to figure it out by yourself. And there's no another kinship term, but we will come back to the kinship term when we talk about address term tomorrow. So again, second person pronoun is difficult. First person, so every level, whatever you say, first person pronoun, second person pronoun, the verb, prosody, and gesture, every single level, verbal, non-verbal level, you have to think about the relational dynamic in order to be able to present yourself in a adequate way. So you can't just you pick up one device. You have to do every single level. You have to think about relational dynamic in order to make the conversation dialogue natural and acceptable. So this is not easy task. Okay, the second person, there are different second person address terms, but again, as I said, very difficult to choose because you know, no is, you can't just say no is informal, 당신 is honorific, because no and 당신, both of them very much kind of used in very limited circumstances. In many normal circumstances, you don't use second person pronoun. You use different kind of address terms. But if you can't find which one is which, the good thing about Korean language is that subject or or object, anything, if you think it's a bit strange to use, you can easily delete it. You don't have to say it. You can just make the context to say what you want to say. So the very important characteristic of Korean language, which is very, very useful. If it's difficult to pin down which is the right word, then don't say it and let the scene or context speak for you. Then and that's okay. And this is the case in many in our natural conversation all the time, every day. And the speech style shift again, like we may start politely, but as we go on and our relationship, so you can make it more intimate or distant. But that decision is again like very delicate, and you have to make it one by one very carefully. Otherwise, you could make the other person very upset or feel misunderstood. So you have to make the judgment all the time, very much gradually, and that can go back and forth. If your relationship with the other person got really bad, then you go back to the the original speech style. But if it gets on well, so you can really tell the relational dynamic between the two by listening to their verbal and non-verbal language, also by looking at their non-verbal expression. So you can tell, and Koreans cannot lie, because you can't, your words, your the way how you express the other person is so visible linguistically and also visually. So this is about the parasite we missed yesterday. And then I'll talk about this 5 relational, the Neo-Confucian Joseon dynasty before contemporary Korea, which lasted 1392 to 1897. The fundamental ethos was Neo-Confucianism. And in some sense, Neo-Confucian ethos in Joseon Korea was even stronger than that of China. But kind of the things that I'm going to talk about in Neo-Confucianism was these 5 relationships, 5 relational dynamics, which have been taught for everyone. So this is kind of the book that you learn, either your privileged your aristocrats, or your commoner, or your whoever you, the woman, man, young, old. These are the things that you always learn, you memorize, and you kind of put them into practice. So 5 relational dynamics. First, father-son relations. So father-son relationship, father and son should have an intimate relationship. But this doesn't actually mean that father-son are very close and like friends, but rather you can think about father-son very much like close friends. And this is something that I can imagine now with father-son or father-children. But in a way, father-son, that the intimacy is not like expressed through like very equal relational dynamics, but more like hierarchical dynamics, in a way that children should show their great respect to their parents. This is the number one. So children should obey and show their respect to parents, to the point like even after their stay as a tradition of shimyosari, like someone make a hut outside your father's grave and then stay there for three years, something like that. So showing your royalty, respect, their life and then after their life. So a lot of ancestral rites and ceremony. So during their life, but after their life. So it's a sort of very much if you the children, you feel very important to, of course, you show respect, but there's a lot of responsibility over there. And king-vassal relationship, similarly, the master and servant, king and vassal, proper relationship, again, like hierarchical, show utter respect towards your king. Husband-wife also hierarchical in a way. Husband-wife relationship, husband and wife are different, but it actually, literally means husband and wife are different, 부부유별, but this refers to the kind of complementary duties of a husband and wife, but also implies a hierarchy within the marital relationship where wife is expected to serve her husband. So it's not like equal relationship, but again, wife should serve husband. That's the ethos behind which we will look at today. The sibling, they again, the brother and sister, they love each other, but again, there's a hierarchical element. Older brother, younger brother, younger brother show respect to the older brother. So these four relationships very much hierarchical, but then the final one, 장유유사, old and young. Old and young should have order. So it means refers again, like young people should do respect older people. Even if they are not your parents, you should show respect. So when you look at these 5 relational dynamics, a lot of, basically it's all very much hierarchical. You should show respect. You should show your proper respect towards elderly, towards your older brother, towards your husband, towards your king, and towards your father. So this is very much the heart of the Neo-Confucian relational dynamics. And what we can see here is that this has been very well resolved in pre-modern Korea, but also in contemporary Korea. This is quite, we will not talk about the 5 different relations, but this is something that from 국제시장, Ode to My Father, the film. And the son asks his mother about working abroad in a war zone before discussing the matter with his wife, Sandra, who observes the powerlessly and visibly uncomfortable. So she's wife. He never talked to his wife about, what he's going to do, but he's talking to his mother. Again, this is very much, I would say, natural, which I also grown up in, when I was young. Like, you have to, husband-wife relationship important, but more than husband-wife relation, sort of equal relations. What matters is that you respect your mom, your mother, your parents. So she is talking that first to his mom, and she is there. She's kneeling down. She doesn't feel happy, but she can't say, didn't you tell me before? But you can see that she's unhappy, but she knows that this is the deal. But also like a grandma-grandson relationship. We will talk about Minari tomorrow, the new film. But again, the age hierarchy is important, but also the interest matters so much. So maybe you just listen to this clip. Maybe you did you hear it or no? Could you hear it? Or maybe maybe you didn't hear it. But yeah, this is again like she maybe I'll talk this tomorrow, but more. But she's kind of she's just come to America to look after her grandchildren, and her English is not so great. I mean, there's a pretty boy, but he's not very upset. But what I'm trying to say is that the relational dynamic, not like always that your grandma is old, therefore we show great respect. But grandma, grandparents, and grandchildren could be very, very close to each other. So something like that, very informal situation, they can talk to grandchildren, can use the half talk, casual form to their grandparents, and this is okay. So it's again, what I'm trying to say is the relational dynamics not always like kind of like a law that you are older than my grandparents, so I should respect. So kind of respect and intimacy interplay all the time. And here we see like some sort of like interplay, although later on this boy is going, in the film you see like a lot of times he's been told off by his parents because he's not showing proper respect, although she doesn't care and she really loves him, and then kind of shows more intimacy rather than expecting respect. So one thing we're going to talk about today is kind of womanhood, like Joseon in what was like woman's life. Very much so the woman rule right were not there in Joseon Korea. 남존여비, which is like, men should be elevated and respected, and woman shouldn't be humble and lowly. That was kind of the basic idea. And there was a 7 evils for woman that is kind of considered as evil. Okay, there's qualified woman to be divorced by her husband. And the first one, not looking after her husband's parents well, not producing a son, sexually immoral, jealous, genetic disease, talking too much is stealing. What I found very interesting always is that if you talk too much, you're really bad. So again, like kind of expectation that you should be quiet, you shouldn't say anything, you should do what you are told to do. This was like in pre-modern time, but again, we can see a lot of parallelism in contemporary Korea too. There's like very much so that Confucius once said that there are 3 joys in his life: to be born as a person, to be born as a man, and to live alone. So he said that I'm happy because I'm a man. And so you can see their Confucian is just very much like against this womanhood and woman's rights and so on. Before 17th century it was much better, but after 17th century became much more strict, but this became much more strict. This is kind of the song which has been taught by as I said, like for everyone in Joseon time. Again, like this song, the ethos of this song is basically the 5 relations you have to always remember, and you have to always make sure that you keep this 5 relationship right in your daily life. And this is also applied to your speech, in the way how you speak and interact with other people. Respect those 5 relations. That was something that taught to everyone. And after Hangul has been invented, there's it's one of the few first books that's been published that basically with the picture and Hangul and classical Chinese all together, they wanted to teach the value of these 5 relations. So to be a good citizen, to be a good person, you have to really keep the 5 relations, remember 5 relations, and practice it all the time. That was Joseon Korea's foundation. And again, but then there's a lot of, this song is very, very interesting, and I've translated with my student, and it's in my book. But again, like it shows that these are 5 relations. There's something that maxims that you have to keep, but in your in your everyday life, you may not be happy to come across this so many restrictions. And so one of the things about the lot of conflicts in relational dynamics, and for woman, of course, the man, husband-wife relation, dynamics also, sometimes, could cause conflict and trouble. But for women, a lot of time, the trouble really was the case when they had conflict with their in-laws. That we were going to watch this clip, but so the way how they kind of solve their, resolve their stress by making songs, and by kind of trying to. But a lot of time they had to suppress it, but also a lot of stress from this, conflict with in-laws, mother-in-law. So yeah. This is how what I try to show is how their Confucian values actually also contemporary Korea you can find many different ways. It's not like completely this is gone pre-modern values, but this is also very often visible in contemporary Korea. Jo Nam-ju, who has written the book 1982, Ki-Jung, he said actually the world hadn't changed at all. She said, well, basically we see the same picture in Joseon Korea, how it was like, particularly when it comes to woman's life. And this is the reason this is very well shown in the film. So again, like this mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, we look at this yesterday, but maybe, and this is another film called Sado, again, very much in the palace, there's much more rules, what should do, what we should not do. So it's Neo-Confucian, value system in Joseon Palace. We can imagine that could be very strong, but this is also the case in very much 21st century South Korean home. maybe just watch this clip if you can hear it. Maybe you can you?
네 인연, 어찌 옹주 따위가 장차 왕비가 될 핑군가 어깨를 나란히 하고 앉는단 말이냐. 어서 국제의 예법을 갖추어라.
Where you sit, where you also she's told off why you're sitting there. You have to sit next to the this line rather than sitting next to more royal person. Okay.
조상을 모실 때 각별히 유념해야 할 것이 있는데. 저야 무늬만 중전이죠. 주상을 오래 모신 영빈이 하시게.
We won't watch this clip all together because of the time, but you can actually see the dynamics and who you could be the most powerful, and you can kind of figure out through their gesture, so nonverbal expressions. But can you tell me whether you can hear or not? Can you hear?
Yeah, we can hear you.
That's good. Okay. Very good, very good. So let's watch this clip, which could be more relevant. This one.
이걸
야구라는데 세상 쉴게.
요새 명절 음식도 주문하면 끝내준다. 맛도 좋다 하던데.
1년에 한 번 식구들 먹는 거 그걸 뭐라고 밖에서 사오고 시켜간단 말이고.
아니 힘드실까봐.
니 지금 내 걱정을 하는 기가. 우리 대현이는 신신 남편이 있네.
집에선 제가 다 해요, 어머니.
아이고 뭘 하나. 정말 우리 아들 못지도 않는데 토를 가노.
그게 아니라
엄마가 아들 하나 더 낳은 일이 하나 수월할 낀데 아버지랑 좀만 더 봐. 나지고 방이고 부가 시절이 막 사.
차가 돌았나.
아이라 삼촌 하나 놔줄까? 어?
아까 시끄럽다마. 어이까네 둘이서는.
Yeah, very much like it shows the dynamic Korean people may be familiar with, mother-in-law, husband and wife. And basically the husband wanted to help his wife, but the mother-in-law kind of saying, why are you trying to help your wife? And that was, and you can see like how wife, daughter-in-law could be kind of sandwiched between the two, and it's very difficult to express, difficult to, to say what she wants because of this, again, Neo-Confucian value system. Which is kind of, yeah, maybe you can watch another clip, and that's it. I think we can talk about it.
어머니.
더 자주 와.
잤어요. 어머니 이거 시금치 다 삶으실 거예요?
아, 니한테 그거 있다. 마음에 들란가 모르겠다.
이게 뭐예요, 어머니? 어머니 너무 예뻐요.
그치?
네.
맞지? 네, 네 이거 네 주려고 주룩주룩 서갖고 챙겨왔다.
감사합니다.
망치고 뽀로로. 지금 나 살았어. 이거 끝내고 빨리 가자.
가 있어?
저희 아직 있었네. 가슴하고 걱정했다.
오랜만에 가족들 보고 그런 얘기 명절이지.
아유나! 짜자잔! 이거 봐. 세상에.
언제 이런 걸다 샀노?
아이 틈틈이 샀다.
어머, 이거 있다. 딸내미가 최고다.
너무 이쁘잖아. 우리 아영이는 좋겠다. 고모가 막 이런 거 저런 거 예쁜 거 다 사주고. 그래도 우리 선녀는 예쁘지?
아이고 알았어.
아이고, 그래도 친정이 제일 좋다. 오늘 너무 힘들었거든.
그래, 욕 봤다. 자, 이 전점 대피가 온다. 수정가고 갈도 좀 내가고.
엄마, 내가 갖다 먹게.
아이고 앉아 있어라. 니는 시댁에 놀다 왔네. 지영아, 니도 힘들면 방에 들어가 좀 쉬라.
잘 샀지?
알았다.
This is one scene again, I think it's so familiar to every Korean person who is watching this. But again, like she, kind of, they all sort of, she was very happy because she can go home. But now she was about to go, but her sister-in-law arrived, so now she has to do all again. She now finished her washing up, but now she has to prepare another food for her sister-in-law, and she kind of sighs. Again, it kind of shows the sort of inner conflict, and so much so that the dynamics very much unnegotiable in South Korea, in contemporary South Korea. Like some of the relational dynamics are negotiable, but in no relational dynamics, the woman's position very much unnegotiable, that you have to kind of accept it. So there's sort of like a new word, neologism, in sort of describing the situations called post-holiday syndrome. Like an older woman, like married woman, don't want to go and visit their in-laws because of this post-holiday syndrome, working so much during this holiday time. So there's but it kind of shows that the language, I mean, mother-in-law uses, the other people use this sort of like, language with some authority, but more other things much more visible in this film through the gesture, and also the way how they interact, and the way where they are even. The Ki-Jung always kind of prepares the after cooking, and now the second step is to prepare the fruit to eat, cut the apples, and so on. And then whereas the older man, as you saw, the like sitting in the sofa and watching television and other things, but then daughter-in-law has to do everything. So this is sort of like very much like, you can see like where people are, what they do. You can tell the, the role and relational dynamics. And so I think we can see like here, like where people are, like, this is very much typical man's position, whereas the daughter-in-law has to be always there doing the last washing up, doing another preparation, and so on and so forth. But it's very different if your daughter, you suddenly kind of come back home, you will be treated like a princess, whereas daughter-in-law always has to kind of serve, as we saw about 7 evils. The first thing, you have to look after your parents, your spouse, your husband's parents very well, number one. The same thing now in contemporary Korea. You have to actually look after your husband's whole entire family well, at least during this time. So this is what we can see from this film, very much close to reality. But again, they're sitting like almost ready to serve the next stage, whereas men also participate in ancestral ceremony, whereas women stay behind. And she is always wearing apron. It's this kind of symbolic in the in-laws house, wearing apron all the time, kind of ready to serve. She's not there as a daughter-in-law, but she's there to as someone who needs to serve throughout the day. And yeah, the other things. One thing, so I'm sorry about the time, but I will again, I need to introduce you this challenge. There's a sort of 5-day learning Korean challenge. If you can kind of fill this form, that basically every day you will receive 2 kind of politeness kind of situation, like how you can find the right answer to, in the different situational dynamics. So it's kind of something that you can actually kind of figure out yourself whether you will need the polite situation or non-polite. How can you can use Korean language, well, in each situation, whether in a polite way or impolite way. So this is kind of little, very small quiz-like challenge. But if you are interested, please do email to fill the form, and then my RA from Seoul National University will email you about the details. But this is, yeah. And then finally, all the handout. We are actually at the moment creating a podcast as well as the PowerPoint, and that will be all available on the our Twitter, which we haven't used for some time, but we are going to activate it soon. So if you kind of look at this or follow this Twitter, we will let you know that you can have you can listen to the podcast or to the PowerPoint in the due course. Thank you so much. I know that time has been a little bit over. Sorry, but maybe 1 or 2 questions I can answer.
Sure. Oh, thank you very much, Professor Jian. It's a very interesting topic. Yes, we have several questions. First, I hope that my pronunciation is correct. If not, I apologize in advance. The Constantina has one question. Constantina, could you repeat your question to all of us?
Yes, hello. I was thinking, give me a second. Yeah, why respect is being confused with obedience? You can still respect someone, but not obey them, or like, especially having democracy right now in Korea. Or for the, as we saw for the mother of the groom and the wife, you can still respect someone, but do your own things and just not insult them or talk to them politely, as you mentioned, but obey them is quite different. It means that you don't have rights. It's not, and you are not getting respected as well. So why are these two being confused?
Yeah, I think probably, kind of these understanding what actually respect means in Korean culture has not very much. I think, respect and obedience, that's also different levels. And it doesn't mean that, you respect someone, you can still say what you like to say. But why should she be silenced almost? But I think, again, like this very much strong pressure from Neo-Confucian ethos in contemporary Korea throughout. So basically, like I think, when a film is very good, way to observe these things. But somehow these two conceptually distinct notions are almost mingled together and become one in Korean society, I would say. And something like, yeah, I can respect someone, but still I can say what I want to say. Absolutely, I think that's correct. But in Korea, as I showed in one of the 7 evils, woman talking too much always considered as something like not it's not desirable. So it's almost like for her, if you watch that film 1982 Kim-Jung, she only thing she says is like yes 어머님, which is yes mother-in-law. She doesn't say, and she's not expected to say anything. That's she is not expected to say much, but she's always kind of asked to do things, and she has to say yes. Mother-in-law doesn't even wait for her answer. What she says is almost law. You should do it, and there's no kind of yes or no, or I can't. I need to go home, so you can look after yourself. You can't say that, and that she really wanted to go home. She said, "Oh, I've done enough. I want to go home," and she was about to go home, and then sister-in-law, she can't say it, but did you kind of can you remember her facial expression, like utter despair, and that was all she could express. So I think sort of in a way, sort of contemporary, womanhood. Of course, there's, I cannot generalize it, but there's, certain aspect that societal pressure made women almost silenced, not being able to speak up and to basically, respect and being somehow all become one concept that put another pressure, particularly if you're a working woman. Kim Ji-young is a working woman, so she's struggling really hard, and at the end she has mental breakdown because of her different demands and roles, and maybe her character too, that she's not so much like expressing. And if she did express, that would I can imagine, like cause a lot of conflict between her and her mother-in-law. And she wants, we all want to have a good relationship with each other, so she wanted to have that good relationship, but then it didn't really work because societally, I think still in contemporary Korea, there's a lot of pressure for women, how a woman should behave. That's been not much difference from pre-modern Korea in one sense.
Thank you for the answer. Actually, after your answer, I have way more questions, but we don't have a lot of time, so thank you.
Maybe you can email or put the question in the Twitter, then I will look up and then try to answer if I don't answer the question.
Okay, thank you.
So if I may, can we have just last one more question, if I may? Oh, yeah. So Berenice, could you introduce your question? Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. You sort of already answered the question, but I was wondering, just to put the question in context, I was in Korea 2 years ago and I lived there for about 2 years, and I think it was my first time in Korea, but I witnessed a lot of, I felt like the society is very dynamic and changing very fast, and I was wondering if you think these 5 fundamental relationships or relations of Confucianisms are maybe evolving, transforming, are new relationships added or old ones removed from society. By my personal opinion, I felt like it was the case, or it was starting to be the case, but I wonder, as a Korean person, what you think.
I think it's a really good question, and I think society is changing. When you what is Korean culture like, changing so dynamically and internationalized so quickly. But I think sort of maybe just one thing I will comment on one thing, which is, as we can see in the Parasite, the film, somehow these sort of like the sort of more like traditional value system or criteria maybe was still important, but I think nowadays sort of socioeconomic status, one's wealth, kind of became almost another thing that kind of judge people where you belong to. For example, like this person is harmony or this ajumma, very purely based on how they wear, what do they consume, and so on. So I think it's kind of the Neo-Confucian hierarchical society, the value is still there, but with this sort of socioeconomic or like capitalistic ideas. But I think also it's changing. So a lot of things are changing, but I think there's sort of the this hierarchical value, which it's a lot of things changing. But in Korean, still, if you're speaking Korean, you cannot ignore relational hierarchical dimension. You have to make sure that who is the senior and who is junior. You cannot, otherwise, like the child that I show in the picture, you cannot end the sentence. You have to say who, and then can't say. You have to kind of really. There's one thing in the early 20th century, someone called Park Seung-bin, the linguist, tried to reform language. Let's make it really equal, and let's get rid of all these baggage, cultural hierarchy, and so on. but then it didn't work. So that was 1920s. So they, well, let's make it really, and then he was questioning, why do we not have any second person pronoun, which is so useful to address each other? But so he said, well, we need a second person pronoun, let's make one. And, let's reform the language, bring more equality and to the society, just because class system destroyed in the early, after some period. But then that linguistic reform didn't work. So we still have this very much baggage of hierarchical, who is senior, who is junior, even very young generation, like, what I'm talking about, secondary school children, as I said, the most hierarchical 선배-후배 phenomena still observed now in today's time in secondary school. So things are changing, but not actually really fast changing. It's just the elements there. So
okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Once again, all of you and Professor Jun and also the Korean Education Center to let us have this wonderful discussion and listening to her the recent research outcomes. I'm sorry for the noise which is coming from my room. Okay, so this is the end of today's webinar, and we have the 3 more the topics to go. And tomorrow we'll be hearing from the Professor Jun again, and with regards to how to address people. So hope to have you. Hope that you have a sunny day, a sunny Tuesday, and see you tomorrow. Okay, bye.
Thank you,
감사합니다.
teacher.
감사합니다. 네.
감사합니다.
감사합니다.
네, 고맙습니다.
고맙습니다.